Okay, so because I have the code in the sheet, let's go ahead and work our way through it. This code here, you might recognize it was from previous week's worth of work because I'm doing them as a sequence, so hopefully they logically connect. I'll come back to, we're not using the calculator, so I'm just going to remove that from this app. Bear with me, my environment does not needs to set permissions. I'm going to get rid of what I had. I'm going to keep my console functions there, but I don't need my calculator. It's not relevant here. So I've got my main. Let's have a look at a bit of code from week 3, quickly go through it. And again, you know, the scanner here, now this is going back a step. If you think about it, this block of code could actually go in my console functions, but for the sake of argument, because I'm doing something more drastic, we're going to approach this slightly differently. What I really want to do is press enter. Bear with me a second. Enter and return, and it should input my, no, it didn't. That was unhelpful. Let me quickly, maybe it did. Hang on, up there. There we go. It's got my scanner. We're all happy. Right, so what does that do? That builds my scanner object. That puts the prompt on the screen. Again, why am I not using my console function? Output to console. Since it's a string, let's, you know, we built it some time ago. It's nice and simple. We'll just throw that in. We're going to get an int. Again, why am I not using a console input? I've got a get double, right? So let's just use, and notice with the console, it no longer has static, this one. This is actually an object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to revert it back to static. And so I can use it statically. Let's create a getInt method here. Int, I'm returning an int. I'm asking for an int here. I give it. And here I get next int. Right, so that's all my code up to date with that. Let's come back over here. I need to import. Now this will be interesting. If I import objects, import, hang on, bear with me a second. I want to import console. Now what you notice here is that, hang on, I need to import, bear with me. You don't notice it because I have an object dot console functions. Here we go, console function. And it's actually console functions dot star, and I needed the static word in front of it, so it's not, you know, perfectly transparent what's going on. Not happy with that object, import static. Let's get rid of that, add into there. You're not happy with that. This is the problem I have with the static import. Notice I can't remember, and you end up fiddling around with it. So why do it statically? Right, if you want my personal opinion, although I thought it might make life simpler, I really actually am going to just stick to standard objects. Right, then I don't have to import it. I just need to do this. I got console function, let's spell it correctly, console functions, and I'm going to call it console as my object. Then I am going to create a new instance of it. To console functions. It doesn't require any parameters. At empty, grab my console, paste it there, put a dot in there. There we go, all sorted. Now that little faff, that introductory faff, was because I was trying to go back to static, and in the back of my mind while I was doing this video I thought, let's do the static for those who didn't bother doing the earlier stuff. But you notice I just got caught up with what the right import statement in, it had to be static and all that kind of nonsense. So I'm abandoning it and I'm sticking to objects. Objects are a standard way to proceed. I just create an object out of it and I'll use it throughout. The only rule it seems to break here is that I've created it, taken up memory, and I'm not using it in every single line. So there is a kind of shortcoming of this particular approach, but we'll stick to it. Okay, so we've got output to console. Actually in console functions I've created a getInt. So let's just go back here. Let's get rid of all of that. Let's get rid of that. Put that into there. We just need our prompt in there, which is please enter size of array. Get rid of those lines. And you'll notice it's saying getInt. I don't know where you are because I need my object dot getInt to use it. Okay, so that will get me my int. I've got my array size. I then initialize, according to the code from week 3, simply initialize the array to that size. It's empty at the moment. Typically, it will fill all the empty values with zeros, but you can't guarantee it. Now I want to add items, so I'm going to stick a little loop in here. Now remember, this is all week 3 code. Where are we now? What's going on? Int array, bear with me a second. Have I done this twice? What have I done? Have a quick look. Right, int array. Let's go underneath and let's make sure that we know what's the problem with it here. Content of int array are written to but never read. Okay, that's just a general comment from, obviously, I've got an input next int. So here I can just use my getInt, right? Again, I'm saving myself a bit of code by not having multiple lines to achieve a particular purpose. And again, you can't use getInt on its own. You have to use console, which is the name of my object. GetInt, get rid of that. We don't need that. Now, if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm taking the code from week 3 and just adapting, tidying it up a bit. So in this loop, I've got an array size. Technically, you should actually ask the array itself how long you are. It releases its own length. Once you create one, it has a length parameter, and you should be using that in here. That guarantees that the array is actually built and you're reading from that array. So then we get the int, a value, we store it in the value. Okay, this loop will stop when we hit the end of the loop, and notice it's less than, so the index is less than the length. If the length is 5, the maximum index is 4. It was 1 less because it starts with a 0. So that will populate my array. How do I know it's been populated? Well, let's create a loop to display what's inside it. So again, I'm just snatching the code from inside. Just have a quick look. I've got a system out. Let's get rid of the system out print line and get my console object and output to console. Right, okay. So now my code isn't perfect, but it's all in the client. Create the object, get the size of the array, create the array object, create a loop here to populate each item. Code this yourself. Make sure that you understand this. And then to display it. So if I run it, what we should see is, please enter size of array. Let's keep the number small, 5. Please enter a value to store. Now this is an integer array because I specified up here int, as you can see. So I'm only going to use whole numbers. So let's just do whole numbers: 56, 67, 44, 32, and 7. And if you look at that, it's used that second loop to display the content of the array. Okay, it's given also the index, and I've done that using the index item here from that loop. Nice and useful. We're going to try something similar with that. A nicer way of doing that is perhaps not as separate lines, but comma separated, but we'll discuss that later. So that's week 3. That gives us a kind of useful version of it. I would, if I were you, make these alterations to the code I supply. The code I supply literally goes back to week 3. It doesn't take into consideration the code and comments I gave you for week 4, because I want you to see it, right? So the lecture notes themselves go back to week 3. These are updated because I've given up using this as a static, and I'm happy to use this as an object. Okay, so if you wanted where my attitude towards it, that was what it was. So before we finish this short video and you've coded it and tested it, and move to the next video where we're going to create our object, chuck the array in there and hide everything away, let's just wrap up a couple of critical concepts. One of the critical concepts inside here is that there are some issues, and I just want to indicate a couple of the issues before we go into the next one. The array and all the mechanisms of the array basically fill your client code, right? So your client code over here, however much I'm using console functions, I have to build it here. I have to use the loop with its numbers, its indexes here, and to display it, I have to use it here. That's a shortcoming, and that's perhaps the first shortcoming I want you to have a look at. If I were going back to week 4 and I said, what's the concept of this? Well, it's actually getting messy straight away. The concepts are hidden inside the mechanisms. These are all mechanisms. These are all how bits of code which do stuff, you know, and they do it in a certain way. I want to use an object to hide as much of this away so I can call a method which tells me what I want. It doesn't have to give me all of this interior material, right? So that's the thought to stop on. I'm going to let you code that. I'll leave that on screen just there. Make the changes I made in here and then be ready for the next one.